Jesus Christ died for me. Are we good? One, two, 1, 2. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, well, yeah, because I might get wound up. Got to keep me turned down in case I get wound up. Good morning, everybody who is here. Good morning, everybody who's joining us online. Good morning. We are in our auditorium class. If you're just joining us, you hadn't been around for a while, we're studying the book of Matthew. We've been in Matthew for a while, plodding along at a snail's pace, but that's okay. We're not in a hurry. But we're going to be studying Matthew for the foreseeable future. So feel free to, if you miss one, come back. We'll probably be pretty close to the same place you left us. So those of you joining us at home, Matthew, we're going to be in chapter 9 when we get there. So if you want to go ahead and be turning there, you'll be ready to go when we get to that point. I wanted to play a game with you this morning, but I didn't. I've done this with teenagers before, and it's more fun with them. I didn't figure y'all would enjoy it as much. But imagine, okay, first of all, what I have them do when we play this game, and I'm not going to ask you to do it because you're grown-ups and you know, you're going to look at me crazy, but I ask everybody just to swallow. Just swallow, right? No problem, right? Everybody can do that. The next thing I ask them to do is to take a cup and spit in it. So everybody spits in a cup, right? And then I say, okay, now drink that. And everybody balks every time. Occasionally when you're doing it with teenagers, you'll have the little 6th grade kid that's not afraid of anything, that like will eat the upholstery off the furniture, and he's like, yeah. But for the most part, everybody balks. And so then you ask the question, why? You just swallowed the exact same thing 2 seconds before, and it was not a problem. But when it's in this cup, there's nothing that has changed in the consistency of that saliva at all. It's the exact same thing you just swallowed. There's nothing changed in the consistency of the saliva in the cup versus the saliva in your throat. But one you will swallow and the other you will not. Why? Well, it's what psychologists call boundary psychology. The idea is that that once something is across the boundary, it becomes other. It becomes separate. It becomes different. And so therefore it is harder to bring back in. Now that's just it's a silly little exercise, but it really illustrates that point really well. There's absolutely no physical difference between the saliva in the cup and the saliva in your throat. However, we will swallow one and the other one we're disgusted by. And so that boundary psychology, that once it is outside of the boundary, it becomes somehow other. It becomes somehow alien. And we'll carry that over in just a minute. But let's talk about that idea of feeling other, of feeling like an outsider. Anybody ever experienced something like that? You got an example of a time that you felt like you were other, you were outside, you were alien, you were somehow outside of whatever it is. Anybody got anything? I got a good one. I was told I probably shouldn't tell it, but that never stopped me before. So we were one time vacationing in New Orleans. Way back before we had kids, I have a cousin that lives in Hammond, just north of New Orleans, and he plays in New Orleans on the weekend in a jazz thing, and so he keeps an apartment there. And so when we were young and broke, the only place we could go was somewhere that we didn't have to pay for. And so we went to New Orleans. Now, I like good food and I like good music, and so New Orleans is one of my favorite cities. But we were dumb tourists, and we're just wandering around. And there are parts of that city that you don't wander around in, but we were too dumb to know that at the time. And we wandered into a diner, which you would think is not a big deal, but the diner was in the part of the town that was I'm just going to say it. It was the gay part of town. And everybody in there, you could see when we walked in that we did not fit. And everybody looked at us, and everybody started whispering about us, and everybody started kind of, giving you that side-eye thing. And I'm like, I just want a hamburger, y'all. I ain't in here to try to fight with nobody. I'm just, I just want a hamburger. But that's one of the times that pops into my head when I just felt like I totally alien, totally other, totally I do not belong. Jason, you had one.
I actually have two.
Okay. Okay. Absolutely. First time as an adult he walked into church, and the first time he walked into jail. Both of those were times that Jason is, I'm repeating that for the folks at home. Katie? Okay. Okay. Wow. Wow. But still. Wow. Katie was telling about boot camp and going to, they offered different denominational church services, and she went to the Church of Christ church service, and she was one of only two females. I'm repeating for the folks at home. The one of only two females among about 70 males, and so that was one of those times. Anybody else? No? Nobody willing to step out there? Matthew chapter 9. We're going to start in verse 9 because we're going to witness some of this at play in this story. Matthew chapter 9, starting at verse 9. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." Stop right there. Jesus is disgusting the Pharisees because he is doing things he's not supposed to do as a good Jewish man, but more than that, as a teacher, as a rabbi, he is associating with the other, the alien, the excluded, and he's not supposed to do that. The Pharisees and Jesus stand on opposite sides of a boundary, actually multiple boundaries. There's a psychological boundary that the clean versus unclean. There is a social boundary, the included versus the excluded. There is a theological boundary, the saints and the sinners. And Jesus is just crossing that boundary like there's nothing to it. And that really irks them because why are you doing that? You're not supposed to do that. Now remember, in the verses that preceded this, he's cured a paralytic, and we talked about that is demonstrating his authority, right? We've talked about that all these stories in Matthew 8 and 9 are about Jesus' authority, that he's had authority over illness, he's had authority over chaos, he's had authority over nature, he's had authority over evil. The last one that we just got through with was the paralytic, and he demonstrated his authority over sin. And so now he is demonstrating a different authority. That he has the authority to change these placements, if you will, the placement in the boundary, whether you're inside or outside. And so Jesus is going to seek the outcaster. Matthew is, of course, a tax collector. You've heard for years they hated tax collectors. Why? Well, because there's a number of reasons. The Romans established local tax franchises to collect taxes to pay for their stuff, their wars and their roads and their everything. And so the way they did that was there would be a chief tax collector who was over the province or the area or whatever, and that guy would be responsible for directly getting the money to Rome. Now he would subcontract, okay, and he would have other tax collectors who sat at booths all over the place, and they would collect various taxes for various things. This one, judging by what we know of the location and everything from this story, as well as the way it plays out in the other Gospels, Matthew, or the other ones call him Levi, is probably sitting at a tax booth near the sea. And he's collecting taxes on fish. He's collecting taxes on boats. He's collecting taxes on commerce. He's collecting taxes on travel. There's all kind of taxes that they have to pay, and we're not going to go through all that because we're not studying Roman history. But That's his job. Now, you'll hear preachers talk about, the tax collectors got incredibly wealthy because Rome just said, you got to give us a certain amount. And then whatever they made above that, that was theirs to keep. And that's true. The problem is the chief tax collector is the one who got the most of that, because he was the one who's getting the. Now, that's not to say that these guys, these little subcontractors at the booths, they didn't sweeten the pot for themselves too. Okay, so we're not saying that, but your Zacchaeus is going to be much more wealthy than your Matthew. Does that make sense? Because Zacchaeus is a chief tax collector, and so he's got all the money coming into him, and so therefore he's going to be a little bit more wealthy than your Matthew Levi. Now, doesn't mean Matthew. We don't know anything about him. We don't know whether he was sweetening the pot or not. But it was common practice that if the Romans said that we need, I'm just going to pick numbers. We need $100 a month out of fish tax, that the person who is collecting the taxes sweetens that deal a little bit. Does that make sense? And so that's then I give Rome their 100, and whatever else is left, that's mine. And so I'm pretty good with that. So that's one. In the eyes of their countrymen, the fellow Jews, they are traitors because they're working for the Gentile, pagan, alien oppressors, and so they're two-faced. They're whatever. If you ever watch any of the alien invasion movies, you know what I'm saying? There's always that one dude that's working for the bad guy that's working for the aliens. That's kind of how they see him. Okay, he's working for the other side, and so even though he may be a Jew, because of his interaction with pagans, because of his interaction with pagan commerce, all those kind of things, he is an outsider. But more than that, he's a traitor. He is one who is turning his back on his people. So they see these guys as traitors. They see these guys as thieves, and so cheats, if you will. And so, but it wasn't just tax collectors. There's an entire lists. There are entire lists of professions, people, and trades that were considered unclean, that were considered outsiders. I'm going to read you just a little bit of one. This is from a Mishnah, which is it's a Jewish. It's like a Jewish commentary. You know, you've heard all your life about how the Pharisees would make laws to keep you from hitting the law. And so they put those in Midrash's Mishnah, the things that were that their opinion about the law. Okay, this is by a guy, Rabbi Guria, and he says, a person may not teach his son the trades of a donkey driver, a camel driver, a pot maker, a sailor, a shepherd, or a storekeeper. The reason for all these is the same, as their trades are the trades of robbers. All of these professions involve a measure of dishonesty and are likely to lead to robbery. So in addition to tax collectors, you would have donkey drivers, camel drivers, pot makers, sailors, shepherds, storekeepers. All of these are considered trades that are frowned upon because they in some way are cheats or robbers. Okay? So, yes, ma'am. That was one of the things I was going to say. You look at how many of those trades Jesus interacted with. And I don't think that was by accident, because he's reaching across those boundary lines and pulling all these people in. What would our modern day equivalent be? Now let's think about that for a minute. Because, you know, we talk about, well, it's an IRS agent. Not really. IRS agents are not, I mean, we don't like them, and we're a little bit scared of them. You know, if one lived next to you, you'd be a little bit anxious about bringing your new boat home. Let's be honest. But it's not like it's not the same. They're not considered excluded. They're not considered unclean or somehow dirty. What professions or trades, jobs might we consider excluded in modern religious society? What would be a parallel? I know it's not going to be exact because we're two different cultures. It's not going to be exact, but give me an idea. Can you think of anything in our modern society that might be considered unclean, excluded, outsiders in modern religious society? Jason. Politicians. That's a good one because that was the first one that came to my mind. Because a lot of us, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, have some animosity towards the other, whatever that is. No, you're right. You're right. But because I think it depends on your framework, your point of view. Because whichever side you're on, you're looking at the other side as being somehow outsiders. Jerry. Okay, used car salesman. That's a possibility. What about trash collectors? Okay. How about if we have somebody who moves in to Huntsville and opens a marijuana dispensary? It's legal. If it's legal, I'm not talking about being illegal. I'm not talking about a drug dealer. That's a different thing. But let's say they legalize it and he opens, Pot R Us on 11th Street, and he comes to church on Sunday. How do we interact with that individual? I'm just saying, what about I don't know. Somebody, come on. I'm priming the pump here. Different religions. Okay. I can buy that. There are some of us who look down or who would exclude somebody because we think that they're wrong, or even more so, we think that they're, a threat. Is that fair? Okay. Say that again. Seen it in construction until they need something or something breaks. I got it. Okay. Somebody else. Nobody? Y'all got to wake up. Robin? Somebody that owns a bar. That's a very good one. Because, that's in many ways, it's a very respectable profession. I mean, you're a business person. You're making money. You're doing, we're not accusing these people of being, there's nothing that says that Matthew is a cheat, even though he's perceived that way, okay? And so, but just a trade, a profession that might be looked at as not included, that wouldn't necessarily, it should be a little bit, I don't know. Say that again. Maybe we need to work against those feelings. Very good. There you go. Now you're getting somewhere. Miss Pat said a prostitute. And yes, absolutely. And that's what we're talking about. Jesus reaching across the boundary lines. Now, in Huntsville, a prostitute would be illegal. And so we're not talking about illegal. Let's say that somebody opens a strip club. Not illegal, but it hits a lot of those things. A profession that might be considered outside. We judge the Pharisees because they are on the opposite side of Jesus. And we look at them and we're like, oh, they're the bad guys. The Pharisees are the bad guys in this story. But if we're honest, we're not that much different. Now, I'm not being mean. I'm not being dismissive. I'm saying me too. We are not that much different. Let's be honest. If you drive by the Jolly Fox at midnight on Friday night and you see my truck parked out front, you're going to go, isn't it great that Jeff's in there preaching to those people? Isn't that what you're going to think? No, not a bit. If you drive by, the strip club and Hunter's car is parked out front, and you go, Hunter is in there ministering to those young people. That is such a great thing. No, and that doesn't make us evil. It makes us human, because we make that jump. And so I think a lot of times the Pharisees get a bad rep because they're the villains of the piece, but we're not really that much different than they are. Robin? Make us be in a bad light as well. Right. Or anything. Yeah. Because then we end up, we end up in gossip and slander and absolutely. Absolutely. So Jesus said, oh, I'm sorry, Julie. Right. Wow. So that, can I repeat that for the folks at home? Julie said that that actually happened to her, that they were they were going and doing a activity. Say it again. Those against drunk drivers, and so they were handing out non-alcoholic beverages at a bar and reaching out to people and doing some of that. And somebody from this church saw her and went and told somebody else, who finally came back to her. But if they would have just come directly to her, it wouldn't have been a big deal. So that we get it. And so my point is, it doesn't make us necessarily bad. It just makes us human. We make that jump. It's just who we are. And Jesus says to them, look, go figure out what this means. Go learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. So here's my first question before we dig into that. In Jesus' statement, there is antagonism between mercy and sacrifice. Why? Why is there antagonism between mercy and sacrifice? Why do you think Jesus says God desires one and not the other? Very good. Miss Pat said sacrifice is a ritual, whereas mercy is a heart thing. Anybody else? Why do you see antagonism between mercy and sacrifice? Nobody willing to jump out there. It's all right. Okay. Ooh. Sacrifice requires doing without, whereas mercy requires acceptance. And what was the last part? And giving from yourself. I like that. I like that. Anybody else? I don't want to cut anybody off. Because, well, this is we as churches, Christians, people who profess to follow Jesus, we are following a Messiah who breaks bread with tax collectors so often that he is called a drunkard. He is called a glutton. He is, this happens so much that he's got a reputation and is being talked about and insulted. And yet and I'm talking about Christianity as a whole, not just our church, but we as a whole, as Christians, as disciples or followers of Christ, instead of being out there in that, more often retreat into our fortified, safe places. Is that fair? Not everybody. I know that's a stereotype, and no stereotype is 100% accurate. Like take, for example, the phrase, hate the sin and love the sinner. We like that one. and it seems pretty clear and straightforward until you try to do it, right? I mean, honestly, let's be real, because speaking from a pure psychological standpoint, it's difficult to do because of that boundary psychology. If we really see this person as a sinner, it is difficult to separate those two. Think about it. How do we refer to a lot of sins? We label groups based on their sin. We talk about the gays. We talk about the addicts. We talk about, I don't know, pick something. Thieves. But we label based on sins, Bernita. According to the Bible, we are all sinners. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so, on one hand, we have to call out sin. That's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't agree with that, that's wrong. But on the other hand, we're called to love people. We're called to reach across those boundaries. And so there are some who will label a church as soft on sin if they're welcoming those people. And conversely, to love the sinner is to respond tenderly or mercifully to people. It's hard to do that when you have this anger at a behavior. And one of the great ones a great illustration that I have, if you've ever worked with anyone who is an addict, and I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but addiction is one of the hardest things to work with, as far as whether it's somebody in your family or your church or whatever. I have worked with people and literally at 2 o'clock in the morning showed up at their house, talked them down, got them in the car, drove them to rehab, and they beat me home. And it's really, really hard not to be mad. Right? And I hate addiction. I hate what it does to people. It's hard not to label that and put that label on an individual. It's hard to separate those two when you're dealing with someone. We label people based on their sins, and this guy is labeled as a tax collector. He's branded. When the religious leaders complain about him, they don't use names. They use labels. Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? You notice that? There was not one name used in that whole sentence. It's not, why is Jesus eating with Matthew? Why is the teacher, someone who should be above reproach, eating with tax collectors, outsiders, traitors, cheats, and sinners, people who are labeled based on their behavior? We do the same thing. We admit that. We identify people not by their names but by their label. So here's the question. How do we balance our outrage or hatred of sin and empathy towards those who commit the sin? Cody? Ooh, there you go. Focus on your own problems and not everybody else's. Because if I'm honest with myself, it's a little bit hard for me to look down on other people because I'm busy pulling the log out of my own eye. Jason? Love your neighbor as yourself. And that, you can get into some deep stuff right there, because I can justify just about anything for me. Right? I mean, let's be honest. I can well, it's not really that bad. I'll just do it this once. I won't do it tomorrow. This won't hurt anything. Or I deserve this. I mean, so what's that? Nobody's looking. Nobody will know. Katie. Ooh. Remember that they're all children of God, and sometimes children don't behave the way we think they should. I love it. Absolutely. It's kind of like driving. You got to stay in your own lane because when we start reaching out of our lane, we lose sight of where we're headed, and judgment's not on us. We know that in the other Gospels he's called Levi. That's just the difference between a Hebrew name and a Gentile name. And so it's really the same guy, Levi, Matthew. The Hebrew Mattai is what it would be in Hebrew, literally means gift of God. And so now that you see another spin on this, right? That gift of God is being considered a reject. That there's something in there that I think we miss because we don't get those nuances. So we're afraid to cross the boundary. We're afraid to reach across the boundary because, I mean, if we're honest, most church outreach consists of people reaching out to people like us. And most church outreach, and I'm not just our church, I'm talking about churches. Most church outreach consists of reaching to people like us, who look like us, who think like us, or we want to bring them in and teach them to be more like us. I mean, we got to be honest. It doesn't make me bad. It just makes me human. But we got to be honest. Most churches' outreach is come assimilate, come to us, come be part of us, come act like us, or we don't do outreach at all. We write a check and we send it off across the ocean because that way somebody else can do the outreach. I can still feel good about myself, but I don't have anybody crossing that boundary. I don't have to deal with them every day. I can feel good about myself because I'm doing outreach. Now, I'm not, don't hear me say, Jeff said we don't do missions. I think missions are a vital part of what we're called to do as the body of Christ. So don't hear me saying that. But I think when that's all we do, we're copping out because we don't want that boundary to be crossed. It's real easy for me to feel good about myself when I'm sending money to somebody who's making converts over there, because those converts aren't going to come in here and ask me to help them move, or ask me for money, or ask me for assistance, or you get me? I'm talking about that's churches as a whole, and I'm including myself in this. We're as guilty as anybody, because if I'm honest, I don't personally interact with, I don't know, what's the sin? I mean, let's rephrase this. We all personally interact with sinners, whether we know it or not. We may not realize it, and some of us are better at hiding our sins or camouflaging our sins than others. But those groups that you think of as being labeled by their sins, as being specific sinful groups, I mean, I don't have any daily contact with addicts. I don't. Now, that's not because I'm going, oh, you get away from me. But I don't. It's somehow just a function of my day-to-day life. And I don't know how to change that. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I guess I could go find places to hang out. I don't know. But then again, then I become the one crossing the boundary, and I'm the weirdo, and they don't want to have anything to do with me. So how do we cross that boundary? How do we reach out and go from labeling people according to their sins to bringing them and viewing them as an individual? How do I do that? Because I don't know. I don't know how to do that without it becoming weird, strange, hard. Jason? when Jason says when he came here being an ex-addict, he felt a lot of love. And that went a long way at making you feel welcome. Right. But it comes back to this same thing here. The difference between the tax collector and Matthew is the difference between the addict and Jason. Because when you're a person, I know you and I love you. When you're a label, it's a lot harder. Hang on, Ann. Cody had his hand up first, and then I'm coming to you. Right. Okay. But Jason will tell you there was a point in his life where that wouldn't have made a difference. Am I right? When say that again louder, Cody, because I'm going to. Nobody would have done that out on the streets. Okay, Ann? Mm. Absolutely. And I can't rephrase that any more eloquently. And so for you at home, basically, Ann's saying we've got to learn to be more compassionate towards one another. Hang on, Steve. I got Casey, and then I'll come to you. Wow. Okay. I buy that 100%. Casey said God places people in our lives for a purpose, and it's up to us to seize that opportunity, to take that opportunity to step up. Steve, what'd you say? Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, there's a good one. I thank you, Sally. That's a great profession. I wish we would have thought of that one earlier. Abortion doctors. That's I mean that's a big one, and that's one that would fit right into what we're talking about. Jesus says, "Look, go figure this out." And oh, I'm sorry, Miss Pat. Oh, absolutely. Right. Yes. That's Miss Pat says sometimes there'll be somebody in your life and for some reason you just don't like them, but yet God keeps putting them back there, and I think a lot of times it's we pray, God, make me more like you, and God goes, you sure you want that? Because I have to deal with you all the time. Robin. Yes. Very good. Very good. Robin said we got Racktober coming up. Those of you who are new, hadn't been around, that's random acts of kindness. Throughout the month of October, we try to push doing random acts of kindness for just everybody, anybody you meet on the street, whatever. But Robin's making the point, if we don't live Racktober all year, then we're still missing the boat. Katie, did you have your hand up? Okay. Tell me what you mean by situationally aware. I'm rephrasing it. Right. Right. Okay. Katie says we need to be more situationally aware. Like, for example, we're in the grocery store and there's somebody here that may need our help or need us to interact with them, but we're so caught up in our own world that we miss that. I think that's exactly right, because it's real. I mean, well, I want to wrap this up because I'm running out of time. Jesus says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. He's quoting a passage from Hosea 6, verse 6, where it says, for I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. In Hebrew, sacrifice is the word zabach. It is specifically not a specific sacrifice. It is used interchangeably for worship. And so when they say, I'm going to sacrifice, or I'm bringing the sacrifice, it's not specifically talking about the bull or the goat or whatever. It's talking about, I'm going to worship. It's equivalent to us saying, I'm going to church. Because we're not really talking about the group of people. We're not talking about the place. We're talking about, I'm going to worship God. And so it's very similar to the way we use that phrase. The other word in Hebrew in Hosea, mercy, is the Hebrew word hesed. And you've heard me hit this word before because it's very, very important. Once you see it in the Old Testament, you can't unsee it because it permeates everything in there. Hesed is really, it's really the Old Testament word for who God is. It's found 276 times in the Old Testament. 150 of those are in Psalms alone. Jesus himself is going to quote this passage not once but twice when addressing the same behaviors in the Pharisees. And basically he says, you go figure out Hesed, and then you'll understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Hesed is your Bibles will interpret it as mercy or as kindness or as steadfast love is one you'll see a lot in the Old Testament. Loving kindness is one you'll see a lot in the Old Testament. The problem is there's no real English equivalent. It's not like the Hebrew word for dog is this and the English word for dog is that, and they both mean dog. Hesed is a concept that we don't have an English word for. It really... preacher friend of mine, Bobby Valentine, put it like this: steadfast love, never-ending love, hell will freeze over before I give up on you love. That's what Hesed is. It is the core of God's heart. It's who he is. Over and over and over, the Old Testament says that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. That's Hesed. The Hesed never stops. God is Hesed. So Jesus says, go figure out what this means. The Greek word Matthew uses is eleos. Eleos is covenant love. I know, it's like the Oscars and they're playing my music. But Jesus' message to the religious people of his day is, go figure out what this means. Figure out what Hesed means, what eleos, what covenant love means. What do you think his message to the religious people of our day would be? It's going to be the same thing. Go figure out how to live Hesed. And once I realize, I look and I go, it's amazing that God has not struck me dead. I mean, as many times as I come back and go, I promise God I'm not going to do this again. And he knows I'm going to do it again when I'm saying it. He already knows that it's going to happen, but he still loves me anyway. He still forgives me anyway. He still blesses me anyway, even though I don't deserve it. That kind of love, that kind of even when I'm at the lowest point of my life and I want nothing to do with church, I can still tell you stories about the hand of God working in my life when I didn't want the hand of God touching me. That kind of love, when we can learn to love in that way, to reach across those boundaries and to love people the way God loves me, I think that's when the church is going to be unstoppable. Sorry, we're out of time. We're way out of time. I'm sorry. We just got to the good stuff, and and we run out of time. Happens every single week. Hey, I appreciate your comments today. It was a good discussion today. We will be back here next week, and we'll do this again. We may pick it up right here. We still gotta finish that passage. So you got about 15 minutes. Take care of your business. Pick up your kids. Fellowship. We'll see you right back in here for worship in about 15 minutes. Thank you, Jason.